Welcome to Moments in History channel. Imagine an empire so vast it stretched from the shores of the Pacific Ocean all the way to Eastern Europe. An empire forged not in palaces or ancient cities, but on the windswept steppes of Central Asia. This is the story of the Mongol Empire, the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen, and the visionary leader who started it all, Genghis Khan. Our story begins in 1206. The world was a patchwork of powerful kingdoms and dynasties. In China, the Song and Jin dynasties flourished. In the Middle East, the Khwarezmian Empire controlled the heart of the Silk Road, and in Europe, knights in shining armor were the masters of the battlefield. But far away, on the vast grassy plains of Mongolia, a revolution was brewing. A man named Temujin, born into a world of warring nomadic tribes, had a vision. He saw a unified people, a nation bound by loyalty and a shared destiny. Through sheer force of will, brilliant political maneuvering and military genius, he united the scattered Mongol tribes under a single banner. At a grand assembly, or Kurultai, he was proclaimed Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. The Mongol Empire was born. But how did a nation of nomads, outnumbered by nearly every empire they faced, come to dominate the world stage? The answer lies in their revolutionary approach to warfare. The Mongol warrior was a force of nature. From a young age, they lived in the saddle, mastering the art of archery on horseback with a skill that was simply unmatched. Imagine this: a warrior galloping at full speed, able to twist in their saddle and fire arrows with deadly accuracy in any direction. Now imagine tens of thousands of them, moving as one. Their primary weapon was the composite bow, a marvel of engineering made from sinew, horn, and wood. It was powerful enough to pierce armor and had a longer range than the bows of their opponents. The Mongol army wasn't just a collection of skilled riders, it was a highly disciplined and organized machine. Genghis Khan structured his military based on a decimal system. Soldiers were organized into units of 10, called arban. 10 of these formed a unit of 100, a jagon. 10 of those made a unit of 1,000, a mingan. And 10 of those formed the largest unit, a two-men of 10,000 warriors. This structure created clear chains of command and allowed for incredible flexibility and coordination on the battlefield. Orders could be relayed quickly using a system of flags, horns, and smoke signals, allowing Mongol commanders to adapt their strategies in the heat of battle. Their tactics were a terrifying blend of speed, surprise, and psychological warfare. The Mongols were masters of the feigned retreat. They would pretend to flee in disarray, luring their overconfident enemies into a chaotic pursuit. Just when their opponents were stretched thin and disorganized, the Mongols would turn, regroup, and unleash a devastating counterattack, surrounding and annihilating the enemy force. They also perfected siege warfare, learning from the engineers they captured. They built fearsome siege engines, catapults, trebuchets, and battering rams to bring down the walls of the most fortified cities in the world. Their reputation preceded them. Often, the mere news that the Mongol army was approaching was enough to make a city surrender without a fight. With this unstoppable military force, Genghis Khan and his successors unleashed a wave of conquests that redrew the map of the world. The initial campaigns targeted their immediate neighbors, like the Western Jia and Jin dynasties in northern China. Then, they turned west. The massive Khwarezmian Empire in Persia made a fatal mistake. They underestimated the Mongols and executed their envoys. Genghis Khan's response was swift and brutal. In a campaign of lightning speed, the Mongols swept through Central Asia, leaving a trail of conquered cities in their wake. Samarkand, Bukhara, Urgench, great centers of culture and commerce, all fell. After Genghis Khan's death in 1227, his empire didn't crumble. Instead, it expanded under his sons and grandsons. His son Ögedei Khan oversaw the conquest of the remaining Jin dynasty in China and pushed westward into Russia. The Mongol horsemen stormed across the plains, overwhelming the Kievan Rus principalities one by one. Cities like Kiev and Moscow were razed. The Mongol horde, later known as the Golden Horde, would dominate Russia for the next 250 years, shaping its political and cultural development in profound ways. Their advance into Europe was only halted by the death of Ögedei Khan, which required all Mongol princes to return to Mongolia to elect a new leader. Many historians believe that, if not for this event, the Mongols might have ridden all the way to the Atlantic. Under Möngke Khan, the empire launched a two-pronged assault. One army, led by his brother Hulagu, marched on the Middle East, sacking the legendary city of Baghdad in 1258 and ending the Islamic Golden Age's Abbasid Caliphate. The other army, led by another brother, the famous Kublai Khan, focused on conquering the formidable Song dynasty in southern China. This was a long, arduous campaign, but by 1279, Kublai Khan had succeeded. For the first time in history, all of China was under foreign rule. Kublai established the Yuan dynasty, moving his capital to what is now Beijing and ruling not as a nomadic chieftain, but as a Chinese emperor. But the Mongol Empire was more than just a story of conquest and destruction. Once the dust of battle settled, a remarkable period of peace and stability emerged, known as the Pax Mongolica, or the Mongol Peace. For roughly a century, the vast territories under Mongol control were united in a way the world had never seen. The Mongols were surprisingly tolerant rulers. They didn't impose their own religion or culture on their subjects. Instead, they recognized the value of the skills and knowledge of the people they conquered. They employed administrators, artisans, and scholars from across their empire, from Persians and Chinese to Europeans. One of the greatest achievements of the Pax Mongolica was the revitalization of the Silk Road. For centuries, this legendary network of trade routes had been dangerous and fragmented. The Mongols secured these routes, establishing a system of relay stations called Yam. These stations provided fresh horses, food and lodging for merchants, messengers and diplomats. A single gold tablet from the Khan could grant a traveler safe passage across the entire continent. It was said that a maiden carrying a sack of gold could travel from one end of the empire to the other without fear. This newfound security sparked an unprecedented explosion of trade and cultural exchange. Goods, ideas, and technologies flowed freely between East and West. Chinese silk, porcelain, and spices made their way to Europe. European glass and textiles traveled to China. But it wasn't just goods. Paper, printing, the compass, and, most famously, gunpowder, all innovations developed or refined in China, were introduced to the West, where they would eventually transform European society and warfare. Religions also spread. Nestorian Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists traveled freely, establishing communities far from their homelands. Marco Polo's famous journey to the court of Kublai Khan was only possible because of the peace and security provided by the Pax Mongolica. His detailed accounts gave Europeans their first real glimpse into the wonders of the East. However, an empire of this size could not remain united forever. By the late 13th century, cracks began to show. The sheer distances involved made it difficult to govern from a single center. Rivalries between the descendants of Genghis Khan intensified. The empire eventually fractured into four successor states: the Yuan dynasty in China, the Golden Horde in Russia, the Ilkhanate in Persia, and the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia. While they were still Mongol-ruled, they operated as independent empires, often warring with one another. Over time, each of these khanates met its own end. In China, the Yuan dynasty was overthrown by the native Ming dynasty in 1368. The Ilkhanate in Persia dissolved into smaller states. The Golden Horde's power over Russia gradually weakened until it was finally cast off by Ivan the Great. The Chagatai Khanate lingered the longest, but it too eventually fragmented. So, what is the legacy of this incredible empire? The Mongols were undoubtedly brutal conquerors, responsible for immense destruction. But they were also unifiers and facilitators. They shattered the old world order and in doing so created a new one. They redrew the political map of Asia and Eastern Europe. And the borders of many modern nations can be traced back to the divisions of the Mongol Khanates. They created a bridge between East and West, accelerating the transfer of technology, culture, and ideas on a global scale. The connections they forged during the Pax Mongolica helped lay the groundwork for the modern interconnected world. The story of the Mongol Empire is a powerful reminder of how a small group of determined people, led by a visionary leader, can change the course of history forever. Thanks for watching. If you found this journey into the past fascinating, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Moments in History channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. See you next time.